4 days, 40 hours of questioning, and Rahul Gandhi is back for a fifth day at the Enforcement Directorate that has accused him of financial misappropriation. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo story. Today, we are looking at the political implications of this questioning. The Enforcement Directorate now, in a sense, tightening the screws and trying to join the loose threads here. Sonia Gandhi, too, expected to appear before the Enforcement Directorate later this month. Now, the Congress has rallied behind the Gandhis, who have, of course, been accused of tax evasion as well as using 50 lakhs to settle a 90 crore plus loan that the Congress party had, in fact, given the Associated Journals, which was then taken over by Young Indian, a company in which the Gandhis are the major stakeholders. But beyond the case, which of course the Enforcement Directorate and the legal process will settle, what are the political implications? What has this done to the image of the Gandhi family? Is Rahul Gandhi now being viewed with greater suspicion, greater sympathy, or indifference? Are there no political consequences or some political consequences? Let's decode the politics of this case with our panel today. Sandip Ghose, commentator and columnist, is with us. Welcome, Sandip. Dr. Shruti Kapila, who was in conversation with Mr. Gandhi at Cambridge University, is with us. Welcome, Shruti. Supriya Shrinate, senior leader of the Congress, just in charge with a new post at the Congress. Thank you, Supriya. Great to see you. And Yashwant Deshmukh, political psephologist, and of course, the man who leads Sea Voter, is with us as well. Thanks, everybody. Let me start, actually, Supriya, by asking you to come in on how you see this. The charges are reasonably serious. There is a tax evasion. That income tax is suggesting that there's been a tax evasion on an amount of 800 crores. There's a charge of a 50 lakh loan that the authorities say was taken from what they call a shell company. They're basically implying that the Congress paid about 90 crores, but the Gandhis were able to take over a company for just 50 lakhs, and even that 50 lakhs was a loan. The charges are serious, and the Congress is rallying behind Mr. Gandhi. How do you see the politics of this?
No, firstly and frankly, thank you very much for your wishes. But what are the charges? And if I may actually just sum it up in three broad pointers. The first charge is that Young India, which is actually a charitable company, a not-for-profit company, a Section 25 company under the Old Companies Act and a Section 8 company under the New Companies Act, has been making a lot of money, and Rahul Gandhi and Sonia Gandhi are beneficiaries of that. That's the first charge. The second charge is that AJL transferred all its assets and all its money to Young India, and that's how people are benefiting from it. And the third, of course, is that assets worth 2,000 crores have been transferred. Let's break it down, and with your indulgence, if I may break it down with facts, because there are facts, there is fiction, and then there is the ED and the case of it. The reality is this is nothing but political persecution. AJL was a company founded by the leading lights of the day, which included Rafi Ahmed Kidwai and Kailash Nath Kajju and Jawaharlal Nehru and the Tata Trust, because at that time, all that the Indian newspapers were publishing was a view of the crown. The view of the freedom fighters was being denied, and which is why they needed a newspaper, which was also banned by the British Raj. They published the National Herald. At some point in time, AJL, which doesn't declare dividends, ran into financial trouble. The Congress gave it a 90 crore loan, over 100 tranches, all done with check, all done through bank transactions. The Congress wanted that paper to revive in the early 2000s. It wrote off that loan. And as a part of writing off that loan, it converted the debt into equity. The debt had to be extinguished from the books of AJL. It's a very simple process that everybody follows. In fact, just to quote, in the IBC by this government, Tata Steel was facilitated. Bhushan Steel's debt was transferred into equity in a transaction that Tata Steel did. It's a fairly common practice that all over the world is practiced, including in India. Young India is a not-for-profit company. Its shareholders, its directors cannot get a single penny as dividend, salaries, remuneration, nothing. No assets of AJL are transferred to Young India. What AJL earns by way of rents and other things goes to AJL, and according to its own charter, it has to utilize every single penny of it. Rahul Gandhi and Sonia Gandhi have nothing to do with AJL. They're not directors, they're not shareholders, they're not even associated with the governance. How is there a fraud? Where is the fraud? If the money has not been transferred, what are the charges of money laundering? The reality is that the ED in the last 8 years has become a frontal of the BJP. And quite frankly, it has gone on for persecuting opposition. It has gone on to persecute bureaucrats who've spoken against this government. And it is quite simply just that. In fact, the ED had shut this case in 2015, saying there was no ground to persecute. The ED director then was transferred and this case was reopened. That's political persecution. For 8 years you sat on it. You've sent a summon now. Good for you. Go ahead and do what you want to do. But there is no case, and we will get to know as and when this progresses.
And I'll come to them one by one. Okay. I'm saying I have a number of... Hang on, Supriya. I have a number of questions and we'll get to them one by one. But first, let me just open this up for initial comments from the panel. Like I said, the actual sort of points and counterpoints of the case, Yashwant, are going to have been in the public domain. As Supriya mentioned, they've actually been in the public domain for several years. I think a lot of us are also intrigued by the politics of this. Why now? Why so many years later? How is it playing out? You've seen the Congress hitting the street, rallying behind the Gandhis at a time where there's been some speculation over who will eventually take over the Congress party. Is this creating sympathy? Is this creating suspicion? Is this doing none of the above? Yashwant, your take.
Well, as Supriya has mentioned all the points from her side, and I'm sure there would be, something is of justice. So I'm not actually going into the merit of the case as such. As a political analyst, Barkha, however, I've been asking people what they have been reacting to. So first of all, on multiple occasions earlier as well, and on this occasion as well, people do believe that various institutions, including ED and CBI, are actually being used for political vendetta. That's the large number of people on the ground that look at it that way. However, as an analyst looking at the political side of it, Barkha, what I am alarmed is actually at the lack of groundswell, which should have been evident by having that side of opinion, that kind of opinion on what ED is doing or what CBI is doing these days in that way. In other words, if the public is saying that, okay, this government is kind of now pretty much using ED or CBI plenty of the time or for the political vendetta, then I would have been expecting a pretty serious groundswell against what is happening, by what is being done by the ED. So I was less alarmed by what people in power do with the agencies, because we've been there, done that, seen that. We have seen all sort of people into the power and doing that. What is alarming here is that probably a leader like Ragini Nayak, who has been in Delhi University politics, in her heydays, she probably could have managed 10 times more people on the ground for her student politics than the kind of number, Barkha, when you were running the visuals, probably there were more policemen than the protesters over there. So as a person who likes to see how people are reacting to the things, for me, it was actually alarming that people are not reacting to this the way I might have been expecting them to react, considering that majority of the people are saying that many agencies are being misused and they should not be misused. So there is a kind of a disconnect somewhere. There is a missing piece in jigsaw puzzle.
So can I summarize it correctly by saying that although your surveys find that people are indeed cynical about how the Enforcement Directorate or the CBI or other investigating agencies may be used, at the same time, there's no groundswell of sympathetic support as a natural extension of that for Mr. Gandhi?
Exactly. Exactly. You have summed up absolutely well. And this is a disconnect because, generally when we see in our trackers, when we read a perception, we also see that happening on the ground. You remember when when there was CAA, it was on the ground. When it was the farmers' protest, it was on the ground. When it was for that matter, right now, the burning issue of our times as we are talking, the new recruitment policy in the armed forces, people on the ground, you see a public perception data with the public reaction on the ground. It always matches. In this case, it is not matching. So we are missing something. And what exactly are we missing? That is something interesting. Many people might read into different ways, but some, in a very, very probably oversimplistic way, if I may say so, that general feeling is also that this is more of a personal case or personal problem for the leadership. It is nothing to do with an issue which has to do with the society or the country at large. People are not looking at this case as a larger political case or a larger
So
case in the
they're
condition.
basically looking at it as as a problem of the Congress, not a problem of the
Not even
country,
the
but a problem of
problem,
the
not
Congress.
even the Congress, as a problem of the personally of the Gandhis.
Yeah.
They are not even looking at it as a problem of the Congress. That's
Can I
that's what my feeling is.
Can I get Supriya to briefly respond to that before I come to Sandip and Shruti? Actually, there was an excellent piece by Suhas Palishkar in the Indian Express, which said that this was an opportunity for the Congress to make a larger opposition coalition on how the Enforcement Directorate and other agencies have been used, but the Congress has reduced its street protest to this being only about Rahul Gandhi and Sonia Gandhi, and therefore you missed a political opportunity, is his argument. How do you respond? And Yashwant seems to be reinforcing that that's reflecting in people, regular people, while being cynical about the ED and how it's being used, not naturally extending that to some sort of solidarity or even sympathy for the Gandhis.
No, farthest from the truth, and I will tell you why. Let us first not normalize what is happening under this government as far as agencies are concerned. Let us not say, we've been there and we've seen that. No, we haven't been there. We haven't seen what is happening. In this government and under its government's tenure, it is not just the opposition that is being persecuted, but the blatant and brazen way in which it is happening is raising many questions on, will they allow our democracy to survive? And I don't just say it as a euphemism. I don't just say it because it's fashionable to say democracy is under threat. It really is. If you pick up cases after cases, the reality, Barkha, today is that if you are a member of the opposition questioning this government on solid factual grounds, you will be persecuted. But if you choose to put your tail, between your feet and bow down before them, everything will go against you, from a Hemanta Biswa Sarma to a Mukul Roy to multiple names that I have. All cases disappeared because Suvendu Adhikari, because they joined the BJP. So आप जब BJP join करते हैं, आप गंगा नहाकर आ जाते हैं. अगर आप opposition में हैं, उनके खिलाफ खड़े होकर कुछ बोल रहे हैं, तो आपके खिलाफ चीजें होंगी. And it's not just about the opposition. Look at civil society. Look at farmers. They were charged with NIA. Look at what students are having to go through. Our youth are having to go through, because every member of the BJP is calling them gundas today. You think the entire country has turned into arsonists and gundas? No. The reality is that if you're speaking against this government, this is how you will be labeled. This is how you will be treated. This is a government that has stayed silent when the Mahatma has been abused and the Mahatma has been scorned at. So let's not get to, and let's not normalize what this government is doing.
Okay, can I just say though that the CBI was also called a caged parrot when the UPA was in power. So to that degree, there is, I know you, from your point of view, we are normalizing it, but there is a certain degree of cynicism about how institutions can be and have been historically politically manipulated. I can see Shruti disagreeing with me. I'll come to her in just a second. Let me bring in Sandip. Sandip, the timing, I am intrigued. I think Supriya made a very reasonable point in saying it's been what, 8 years? 8 years later, how do we understand this politically? How do we understand this politically? If the charges were so egregious, why was there not immediate action? Why was there not this kind of questioning back in the day when this case first surfaced? Sandip?
Barkha, I will not try to defend any of these things. I would rather go along with all the assumptions or propositions which has been made, whether by Supriya ji and I think Yashwant made some very, very incisive points, and I'll go along with those. I personally also share the skepticism about how the agencies have been operating, not just now, earlier. And the biggest, reason for that is the very poor conviction ratio, or forget conviction, closure ratios. There are so many raids which keep on happening. On this subject, I have written also a couple of articles to say they put the government's reputation on the line. If there's nothing comes out of this, there'll be as it is, there is a credibility deficit, which even the Chief Justice had mentioned in his address to the CBI officers, in a CBI officers gathering. So that's, as Yashwant said very rightly, it's a all-pervasive perception, and that is something the agencies are contending with, and they, I think, owe it to the government and to themselves to see that their credibility is not further compromised by botching up this particular issue. Number two is, I would again not try to contest with Supriya ji the points she made about the case. Those are, part of the whole legal question. It'll get decided one way or the other later on, and it doesn't matter what we are saying today. Our saying is not going to change the course of events. But it's also a fact of matter. I don't know, as a layman, what I do know that in the same case, both the Gandhis are out on bail. I don't know why they're out on bail and why the case has not been closed. If it was such an open and shut case, then by now it should have been just disposed of. And the bail has also been around for quite a few years. I've lost count, whether it's 3 or 4 years. They have been out on bail. And that should have been quashed by now if it was really such an... so there is therefore the whole question of perceptions, okay? And what we are talking about, the CBI and ED's, this kind of an image, is obviously it's not, people have not come to realize this with this interrogation of the Gandhis. You've seen another Congress leader, one was put through far greater public humiliation, if you were to call it, or worse optics and other things. But at that point in time, for whatever reason, the Congress did not feel it necessary to rally behind him. And there are several other instances.
So what do you think is the political consequence of this interrogation, Sandip? Quickly, and then I'll go to Shruti.
Yeah, so if there is the penny has dropped here, I think that is from where we have to, that should be the starting point. So what is the Congress really, as you said, all of you, that, whether the public perception is coming, therefore, that this is because it is of the Gandhis, that's why Congress has reacted in whatever form. That's the point. And just taking a cue from what Yashwant said, my worry is that if this, it's a war of attrition. If the ED continues this, today is the 5th day, let's say it goes up to the 10th day, how will Congress sustain this momentum of this thing, whether there will be a groundswell and uprising by which or it fizzles out? And, that's going to... whether it's an Indira Gandhi moment, which a lot of people are calling, whether that depends on the political equity or capital to be able to turn it around, whether it's Indira Gandhi or...
Yeah, let's bring Shruti in. Yashwant's reading it, that turnaround moment has not happened. It could have, but it hasn't. That there's no public imagination, in a sense, that has been captured by this case. They may not have been damaged, but there seems to be almost indifference. Shruti?
I'm going to make 3 points, Barkha. I've listened patiently to everybody. Number one, actually, India's credibility as a full-on democracy is seriously under threat. It's all very well to reputationally damage the leader of the opposition, and it's all very well to be cynical about government machineries. But a critical difference between UPA and the corruption charges that UPA faced was the media campaign against the government at that point as well. You see none of that. You could either say this is fear, or the entire, media is kind of supine, thinking that, let's just ignore this. But, you have a leader of the opposition, in effect, being harassed for 4 to 5 days. Either arrest him. If you have the evidence, if you've had 40, 50 hours of interrogation, if there is an FIR, go the full hog and let the legal process take on. This is a game of reputational damage, and ultimately, actually, it is whether it is COVID statistics, whether it is the ED. India just looks like a shambolic tin pot democracy of the 70s varieties, where you saw populists in Latin America who did this to their leaders. So that's number one. This is not actually about Mr. Gandhi's reputation alone. Secondly, I don't think you can have personalized campaigns to the same degree as you would have on an issue. And I think to expect for C voter to think like thousands of people are going to come out on overnight. I mean, I think that is also like asking the false question. There has been protest. There is undeniable evidence that the Congress feels charged up about it. Senior leaders, chief ministers, gave up their day work to come and do that. So in a way, what the Modi government has done is opened the salvo to 2024, opened a theatrics where it is picked on Rahul Gandhi, and let's see what happens. But I think for you to actually set it up as that this is no reaction, well, the ED is just doing its job, it's always been so cynical. I think these are really false questions to ask of what is actually a pretty bad situation for India's public culture, political debate, and indeed international reputation.
And I have a follow-up to that before I go to Yashwant. And to clarify, I'm not actually setting it up. I'm merely asking the question. I cannot adjudicate on the case itself, but I am puzzled by a number of things about this case. Its timing, whether the perception may play out differently if once Sonia Gandhi actually appears, and I will put that to Yashwant in a moment. But Shruti, my question to you is, you used the phrase effectively leader of the opposition. The point also is that if you look at the politics of this, people are confused. You have a Yashwant Sinha declared today as the presidential nominee for the opposition, but just days ago, you had the Telangana Rashtriya Samiti refusing to attend a meeting to discuss the presidential nominee because the Congress was present. So we don't actually effectively have a leader of the national opposition. I just wanted to make that political point and get your response to it.
Look, I mean, sure. I mean, this is like, clear as daylight that India has pretty aspirational regional parties, and it now also has a Congress which has a national footprint, unlike regional parties. How that is going to play out, we don't know. And the presidential election is just kind of one of the salvos. But my point is not these kind of theatrics which media and we all get involved in, and even I've come out from my really busy day to discuss this with you. The real issues are really much more substantive. Do you really think that India looks or feels free to you? Do you really think that whether it is student leaders or whether it is civil society critics or whether it is the leader of whether it is Rahul Gandhi, people are free to actually critique? I mean, imagine, I was just thinking the other day, the kind of things Arundhati Roy wrote in the early 2000s, all the way from 2004 to 2014 against the UPA. I mean, she would have been behind bars by this under this government. So I feel that, in a way, Rahul Gandhi can take this flack. He should take this flack because it is symbolic now of what is happening to the country. His case is neither here nor there. I don't know the details. They can be fought out. But he should now really galvanize and become symbolic of what is actually a deep degree of unfreedom in India. And it's all very well for them to kind of do samples and say only 5 people showed up. Here, 2,000 people showed up for Modi ji's rally. These are false. These are absolutely uneven, false comparisons. Something much deeper is going on in Indian society and politics. And it's best we address those issues.
Okay, I was going to go to Yashwant, but I'm seeing Supriya's hand go up. So Supriya briefly and then Yashwant. Supriya, go ahead.
Yes, I'll make a very brief point about this. The fact that we sit on debates like these, or, somebody would turn around and say there is actually no groundswell. If that were the case, Delhi would not have been converted into a police state. Have you seen the number of forces outside our office at Akbar Road? Have you seen how people within the Congress, including elected chief ministers, former home ministers, have been beaten? But Mr. Chidambaram had a fractured rib because the police did what they did to the Congress workers. Women being hurled at, women being dragged mercilessly. This is a behavior that is done by a desperate government trying to get even. This is not if you're a political opponent, fight it politically. But what you are doing is you're trying to crush the voice, which you will not be able to crush. And one point that I would want to make for everybody's consumption, including your viewers, is that the great income tax and the income tax evasion and the 5,000 crore properties that they really talk about, let's get one thing clear here. The income tax, according to its own written submission, has said properties are worth only 330 crore. So where is this 5,000 crore figure coming from? This is coming from the troll army. This is coming from the BJP overworking on reputation assassination. And I will say it again and again, because Rahul Gandhi is the only person, and I say it with some amount of confidence and pride, he is the only opposition leader who gives a damn about an ED or a CBI or about an income tax coming at him. He will continue to question the government and hold them responsible for all their failures. And I will, in the last 5 seconds, say, Barkha, one last thing. Where is the media? Why is the media not talking about the real issues? The media today first turned around and declared the farmers as Khalistanis. It is now turned around and declared every youth in this country as an arsonist. It doesn't talk about inflation. It doesn't talk about joblessness. It doesn't talk about the 10 times number of COVID deaths that are reported globally for India. Where is the Indian media? It has become a supine. There are Noida commando warrior anchors at work, and that is how they deliver. There is no media, and without a media, India's democracy is really under threat. And I do not say it because it's fashionable to say it. I am not mincing any words here.
Okay, lots of different points here. One, we have just spent the last 10 days talking to young aspirants, their anguish, their rage. So there is media. There are people on the ground reporting. We may not be the channels based out of Noida, but a lot of these issues do get play on our platform, and I can think of other independent platforms also. But yes, I do take a larger point that you're raising, Supriya, about where is that interrogation of power, and I think that it's an important point there. However, I want to come to Yashwant and Sandip. Yashwant, obviously your comment that your sense, your feedback is not showing a kind of popular solidarity or even sympathy for Rahul is not something Supriya agrees with, is not something that Shruti agrees with. But I want you to come in on that, but also whether it might be different when Mrs. Gandhi, who has just come home from COVID and getting better from COVID, will actually appear. There is still a difference in how she is regarded even by her detractors. And I'm just, again, returning to the politics, though, of course, there are other structural points of accountability that have been raised by both Shruti and Supriya. Yashwant, go ahead.
Of course, I mean, coming to your last point first, I mean, the optics might be very different if an unwell Mrs. Gandhi, goes to the ED and she is questioned for 5-6 hours like this. We all know for sure, Barkha, the optics are going to be different, and Mrs. Gandhi certainly carries a kind of gravitas and a layer of respect for her. No two opinion about that. You see, what is happening here, Barkha, is media is pretty much here right now in this show discussing what is going wrong. Media is pretty much there while we are asking the people, thousands of the respondent, do you think what is being done by the ED and CBI is normal or is it vindictive? Majority of the Indians are saying it seems vindictive. It doesn't feel nice. They are skeptical. There is a sheer sense of skepticism, and we are reporting it. That's pretty much what media is here about. So as long as we are saying people are finding this weird, that finding is fine. As long as people are finding that, okay, this sound pretty much smells like a vendetta politics, that finding is taken very well. Now, the problem here is where I see quite angry Kapila, actually, when I say that I see a disconnect that, in all other things and issues that we map with the public perception, when the public says we are bothered about it, then the groundswell is directly proportional to what we find in the data. In this case, I am unable to see that kind of reaction to the groundswell. Forget about my surveys and numbers, Kapila. Forget about that. Every damn opposition leader in India, starting from Abhishek Banerjee to Akhilesh Yadav to every person you name it, including Shiv Sena, has been going through the ED and that kind of tamasha. All right. Has anybody during this time come out in solidarity? Forget about the people on the ground.
I'm not
Is
making
there
that.
opposition unity enough to say this is wrong? And if there is a Bharat Bandh against what is being done to Rahul Gandhi and Congress leadership, let there be a Bharat Bandh, or let there be a concrete statement by everybody. That's my problem. That's where I'm trying to
So
say.
basically, you're saying, Yashwant, that is, one second, Shruti, just half a second. Basically, Yashwant, you're saying it's every party for themselves.
Don't shoot, Shruti, don't shoot the messenger. I am just a journalist doing the polling business, and I
You're
always
asking the wrong
report the
question.
numbers the way I see it. The
Okay.
very
You're asking the
embarrassing
wrong.
numbers, the
Shruti, I'll come to
damning.
you. Shruti, I'll come to you. Let him just finish his sentence. I'll come to you right
Shruti,
after
you
that.
just mentioned about the failures of this government, including the damning numbers of the wrongly reported COVID deaths. That was also done by my research only. So our job is to put in the numbers as an analyst and purely as a political observer. And I said it is alarming for me. Why I say it is alarming that I am unable to see the groundswell? Because no democracy worth its salt can survive with a non-existent opposition. Every democracy draws its strength from a pretty strong opposition.
Okay.
Nobody likes to see the opposition going down the drain.
So Yashwant, I have a follow-up, but I'll let Shruti interject. And then I have a follow-up for you. Shruti, go ahead.
I will respond, not interject. I will say that actually this is, you are asking the wrong question. It's very early days. I mean, he can certainly symbolize, he can easily become symbolic of what is a general lack of unfreedom and persecution that all kinds of dissenters are facing in India. Right? Obscure researchers have been disallowed to enter the country with valid visas. This is the kind of regime you're working with, let alone an opposition leader like Rahul Gandhi. So I think that's one thing. Number two, about the groundswell, I'm just saying it's very early days, and people dismissed actually the farmers' strike. And to say that there is no opposition in the country, it's laughable, because the whole country looks restive if you are not sitting there in Delhi. If you are sitting where I am, India looks like a restive, up in arms society in which a very authoritarian government is, looking to actually, shut people down, and a media which has absolutely, of course, there are independent portals and one reads them and one is dependent on them, but there is absolutely zero attention being given to the real question. And so I don't think
I never said that there is no
I don't
opposition.
think that this is about expecting in 24 hours a big kind of satyagraha in Delhi. Now that is an absolutely false expectation to have.
It's not my expectation. I am merely asking the questions.
It is C voters' expectation, and opposition.
No, not even C voters. No, Shruti, not even C
Okay,
voters. This is my expectation.
Let him now respond.
No. I will just take quickly, Barkha.
Yeah.
Shruti, it is not even C voters' expectation. Organizations work separately. There are serious people who frame the questions. Clients give the question. They ask the question. We report it. As an individual political analyst, I see that there is some disconnect. I never said that there is no strong opposition in India. If there was no strong opposition in India, Shruti, Modi would not have lost half the election in the last 8 years. Narendra Modi and BJP has lost precisely 50% of the elections in the last 8 years.
Okay.
He is not invincible. BJP is not invincible as people take it out to be. There is a strong opposition. What I simply pointed out was my personal, and again, I could be wrong. Shruti could be completely right. It might be too early. We will wait for the day when the groundswell, goes beyond that tipping level and there is a huge, massive protest on the ground and millions coming on the street in support of Rahul Gandhi. I will wait for the day, Shruti. No issues. My personal observation.
Can I now bring in Sandip?
Of a disconnect over there.
Okay. We're almost at the end of the show. Sandip, please do go ahead. You've been waiting patiently. Sandip, go ahead. Yeah.
I've been enjoying the discussion for a change, when I'm not at the receiving end. I'll make two comments, Shruti. When you say the degree of unfreedom, I will not entirely disagree with you. But what probably people like you sitting in Cambridge or elsewhere wouldn't know, this unfreedom is probably much more acute at state levels. Okay, you have a woman who made some, very oblique comment about a politician in Maharashtra, and
Sharad
she
Pawar. You're talking, of course, about the Facebook post on Sharad Pawar, and she's been
hard for
absolutely
a month
unforgivably in jail. It is
against
absolutely,
the wrong
yeah.
clause. And this is not somewhere else, somebody draws a cartoon and something else happens. So this is an all-pervasive thing. Who is to blame for it, or how it is triggered? That is something. Only thing I'm mentioning is something which all of you need to. You're talking about press freedom, or what the people talk about press paid news. The phenomena is far more acute at the no. You can deny. I'm not saying you can say the source, but you cannot wish it away as what is happening. If we do that, we are making I think we'll be sort of looking at it very partially. It does not, one thing doesn't negate the other. The second point about which again Supriya ji mentioned about all these other news items which are as she said, is probably being neglected or ignored by the media. I would think there is a similar charge about the Congress. Okay, so if you see yesterday when the Bharat Bandh Day, when there was supposed to be actually a Bharat Bandh and an agitation against the Agnipath scheme, that Congress did a very, very token this thing, but everything was focused on Rahul Gandhi. Even before that, all the things which have been happening, whether it's inflation, whether you talk about the aftermath of the Nupur Sharma incident, the bulldozing, etc., their Congress has been, I think, rather short in their articulation. They've been far more bothered about this one ED interrogation than anything else. And these are things also people notice. And that's where the question, I would, to some extent, just purely on anecdotal and impressions, I would say that is something which people also note. If this was the only
I do have to close, but I'd like Supriya to respond to that. The selective focus on unfreedom is the point that Sandip is making, and there are certainly examples both in Maharashtra and Bengal where you have seen absolutely unconscionable overreach by the state, which he's saying does not get commented on in the same way as the Modi government's similar sort of disproportionate overreach gets commented on. Supriya, your thoughts?
No, quite frankly, I stand for civil liberties, and I think anywhere in the country, if civil liberties are being denied, I think governments need to relook, review, and perhaps put that in order. But this is the mighty Indian state that we are talking about that is scared of a 21-year-old climate activist. So let's not brush this aside saying this is happening at the state level. This is happening at the central government level. If you report against the government, you are charged with sedition. Let's not get too carried away about what's happening at the state level. If you report and God, may his soul rest in peace, the man who reported on Mirzapur spent multiple months in jail on charges of sedition. So let's not get carried away. I also want to say one thing. What more evidence do you need of a groundswell or support than the number of police officers who are barging inside the Congress office? What is happening in the Indian state? Does anybody raise a question on how can police enter the Congress headquarters and manhandle our people and drag women mercilessly? But you don't think there is a groundswell? If there wasn't a groundswell, Delhi wouldn't have been converted into police headquarters for the Delhi police. I also want to say there is a certain amount of fear and a veiled threat that the common people are facing. They do believe if they speak against the government, they could be persecuted. Bulldozer chal jayega. There is a threat. There is fear that they have instilled in people. But you know what? Fear and threat don't last for too long. And I do believe this is the tipping point, because Rahul Gandhi will continue to question the government. No matter what you do, no matter what antics you come up with, and by you I really mean the BJP, they can come up with fabricated cases, because 8 years, you've been in power for 8 years now. Stop blaming the other governments, previous governments. If you had a case at your hand, you would have persecuted by now. All that you want to do is shoot and run. That's all that you want to do.
I have to close it at that note. This interrogation is clearly not going to end today either, and Sonia Gandhi is also going to be summoned, and this is something we can get all of you back to discuss. Thank you very much, Dr. Shruti, Kapila, Supriya, Shrinate, Yashwant, Deshmukh, and Sandip Ghosh, and to our audience, thank you for watching as always. Take care. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.